Everyone knows the image of the invincible Spartan warrior. The bronze helmet, the crimson cloak, the unbreakable shield wall glinting in the sun as a wall of spears advances in perfect silence. A society that produced some of the finest soldiers in the ancient world. But here's the truth. That warrior wasn't born, he was manufactured. Sparta was not just a city with an army. Sparta was the army. It was a machine for creating soldiers, and it ran on a set of strict, often brutal regulations that controlled every aspect of life, from birth to death. These weren't just laws written on stone tablets. They were social algorithms encoded into daily life, enforced by fear, ritual, and surveillance. The state was the weapon. Its citizens were components, sharpened and hardened until nothing else remained. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden blueprint that made Sparta so formidable. We won't just talk about battles. We'll go deeper into the power structures, the social engineering, and the terrifying rules that built the Spartan legend. We'll see how fear of a slave revolt turned an entire people into full-time soldiers. We'll uncover the absolute power of the mysterious ephors, the overseers behind the throne. We'll enter the harsh world of the agoge, the state-sponsored training system that began in childhood and never really ended. And finally, we'll ask, did these secret regulations make Sparta invincible? Or did they quietly program its destruction from the very beginning? To understand Sparta, you have to forget what you know about a typical Greek city-state. When you think of Athens, you think of democracy, philosophy, drama, sculpture, temples, debates in the agora, individual genius, personal glory. Athens celebrated the individual. Sparta did the opposite. Sparta celebrated the state, the collective, the phalanx. Individuality wasn't just discouraged, it was treated as a threat. The Spartan state came before everything, before family, before wealth, before personal freedom, before life itself. But why? Why would an entire society embrace such an austere, unforgiving existence? The answer is one word: fear. After conquering the fertile region of Messenia, the Spartans turned a whole population into agricultural slaves known as helots. The helots worked the land, growing the food that sustained Spartan warriors. But there was a problem. The helots massively outnumbered the Spartan citizen soldiers. Some estimates suggest a ratio as high as 10 to 1. Imagine, for every Spartan citizen, there are 10 people who hate them, who labor for them, and who have every reason to dream of revenge. This created a permanent, deep-seated terror at the heart of Spartan life. The constant fear of a slave revolt that could wipe them out overnight. And so, fear became the central organizing principle of Spartan civilization. Every law, every custom, every habit was designed around one goal: maintain absolute control over the helots, and maintain a warrior class so disciplined that no one would dare rise against them. The Spartan way of life wasn't a romantic choice. In their minds, it was survival. Society was divided into 3 rigid classes. At the top, Spartiates, the true citizens. Full political rights, full membership in the army. Their only job, war. In the middle, the perioikoi, literally dwellers around. They were free, but not citizens. They handled trades, crafts, and commerce, all the things considered beneath a true Spartiate. At the bottom, the helots, state-owned serfs tied to the land, living in a state of constant humiliation and oppression. Here's the paradox. The Spartiates were a warrior elite freed from all manual labor and trade. But they were also prisoners. Prisoners of their own system. They couldn't leave it. They couldn't change it. They could never relax. This is the Spartan blueprint. A small ruling warrior cast sitting atop a much larger oppressed population, held in place by a combination of terror and legendary military discipline. To sustain it, Sparta had to do something radical: take control of its children and begin engineering soldiers from the moment of birth. In most Greek cities, childhood meant play, family, learning, and home. In Sparta, childhood was a brief waiting room before the state took over. Ancient writers like Plutarch tell us that when a male child was born, he wasn't simply welcomed into the family, he was inspected. A council of Spartan elders examined the newborn, looking for any sign of weakness or deformity. If the child was judged strong and healthy, he was allowed to live and be raised. If not, according to tradition, he was taken to a chasm near Mount Taygetus and left to die. Modern historians debate how systematic this was. We don't have archaeological proof of a baby cliff lined with skeletons, but whether entirely literal or partly symbolic, the story tells us something crucial. To the Spartans, a weak child was more dangerous than a dead one. Strength wasn't just admired, it was a survival requirement. For those who passed the first test, childhood in the household was short. At age 7, the state came knocking. Every Spartan boy was taken from his family and enrolled in the agoge, the famous Spartan training system. The word agoge literally means raising, the same word used for raising animals. That's how the state saw these children, not as sons, but as raw material. The goal wasn't to educate an individual. The goal was to manufacture a component for the Spartan war machine. The first step was to break the family bond. From 7 onward, a boy's primary loyalty was not to his parents, not to his household, but to his age group, his herd, and ultimately to the state. In the agoge, boys were divided into units and lived in barracks, supervised by older youths and a magistrate. Life there was a calculated ordeal. They were deliberately underfed, always hungry, always on edge. They were given a single thin tunic to wear all year, no shoes, no extra cloak in winter. They slept on bedding made from reeds they had to gather themselves. Why? Because hardship wasn't a side effect. Hardship was the training. Hunger pushed them to steal. Cold forced their bodies to adapt. Discomfort taught them to endure. Here's the catch. Stealing food was expected. Getting caught was unforgivable. A boy punished for stealing wasn't punished for the theft itself, but for failing to be clever enough. The lesson was deadly serious. A Spartan must be resourceful, stealthy, and disciplined, whether it's food or enemies. Physical training was relentless. They wrestled, they boxed, they ran, they trained with javelin and discus. They learned to fight in formation, to obey instantly, and to suppress any sign of pain or fear. Beatings were common. Sometimes they weren't even attached to a specific offense. Pain itself was a classroom. Academics came second. Spartans learned to read and write, but intellectual pursuits, philosophy, and rhetoric, so celebrated in Athens, were seen as distractions. The agoge wasn't about producing thinkers. It was about producing weapons. As boys grew into teenagers, the training intensified. They were paired with older mentors, relationships that blended education, camaraderie, and strict oversight. Every step of the way, one message was drilled into them. You don't belong to yourself. You belong to Sparta. And at the dark heart of this system, there was something even more chilling. A secret institution that turned training into terror. Among all the institutions of Sparta, few are as frightening or as mysterious as the Krypteia. The name means the hidden thing. Think of it as a combination of special forces, secret police, and state-sanctioned terror squad. The best, toughest, and most ruthless young men from the agoge could be selected for this clandestine service. Armed with only a dagger and a few supplies, they were sent out into the countryside alone. No cloak, no armor, no escort. Their mission? To stalk and kill helots. Especially those who seemed strong, organized, or outspoken. Helots walking the roads at night could simply vanish, their bodies left as a message to the rest. Never forget who holds the power here. This wasn't rogue violence, it was policy. Every year, Sparta's ruling council, the ephors, would perform a chilling legal ritual. They would formally declare war on the helots. That declaration meant that killing a helot wasn't murder, it was an act of war. The Krypteia had two functions: terror and control. It kept the helot population in a constant state of fear, eliminating potential leaders and rebels before they could organize. Final exam for the Spartan elite. It tested young Spartans in stealth, endurance, and psychological detachment. They had to hunt humans, survive alone, and obey orders without question. Imagine being a teenager, raised in the agoge, now turned loose with a knife, told to kill in the name of the state, with no witnesses, no oversight, and no mercy. This is how deep the system penetrated. Sparta wasn't just training you to fight on a battlefield. It was training you to live in a moral universe where the state's survival justified anything. This idea runs directly into the next layer of control, the men who orchestrated all of this from the shadows. On paper, Sparta was ruled by two kings, yes, two royal families, two bloodlines, supposedly descended from Heracles, sharing power to avoid tyranny and provide continuity in war. It sounds like a lot of power, but the real power in Sparta belonged to someone else. A small council of 5 men called the ephors. The word epher means overseer, and they oversaw everything. Elected annually from among the citizen body and not eligible for immediate re-election, the ephors were a rotating elite with near absolute authority. They presided over the citizen assembly, acted as judges in many legal cases, supervised the agoge-managed relations with the helots, and perioikoi directed the activities of the Krypteia. Most importantly, they had power over the kings themselves. The ephors could prosecute a king, put him on trial, even depose him. To make sure no king forgot that, 2 ephors would accompany him on military campaigns. Imagine that. Even on the battlefield, the king is never alone, and never unobserved. This system did 2 things. It prevented any one individual, even a king, from overshadowing the state. It created a form of deep state, a small group with the authority to steer foreign policy, internal security, and education. They were the invisible hands on the steering wheel of Sparta, and every year, new men took their place. In theory, this yearly rotation protected Sparta from corruption. In practice, it created a world where 5 men at a time could reshape policy, direct wars, tighten or loosen control, and decide how merciless the system would be. The Spartan machine wasn't leaderless. It was carefully monitored, guided, and adjusted by these overseers. From the agoge to the Krypteia, from the phalanx to the common meals, the ephors were the hidden regulators. But to really understand how total the system was, we have to look at something more intimate: daily life. Sparta's strength wasn't just built on special institutions. It was woven into everyday routines, where other Greeks might have private lives, hobbies, business ventures, and family time. Spartan citizens lived under a quiet, constant supervision. One of the most powerful tools of social control was the city-states, the common mess hall. Every adult male Spartiate was required to eat with his mess group. Not sometimes, not on special occasions. Every single day. Eating your main meal at home? Forbidden. Why? Because the city-states served multiple purposes. It reinforced the bonds between soldiers. You didn't just fight together, you lived, joked, argued, and ate together. It acted as a surveillance network. Everyone saw who was strong, who was struggling, who complained, who stayed silent. It erased visible differences in wealth. Everyone ate the same basic food, and that food was famous, or infamous. The most notorious dish was the black broth, a stew of pork, salt, vinegar, and blood. Foreigners supposedly couldn't stand it. One outsider said that once you tasted Spartan black broth, you would no longer fear death. The point wasn't culinary pleasure. Food in Sparta wasn't meant to be enjoyed. It was meant to sustain a warrior. Each Spartiate had to contribute regularly from his land to supply the mess. If he couldn't, if his estate failed, or if he couldn't provide, he risked losing his status as a full citizen. Imagine that. Your right to call yourself a Spartan depended on feeding your mess hall. Economic life was equally regulated. According to tradition, the lawgiver Lycurgus outlawed gold and silver coinage. Instead, Sparta used bulky iron bars as currency. They were heavy, awkward and nearly worthless outside Sparta. This did two things. It made it very hard to hoard wealth. It made Spartans unattractive trading partners. Whether or not the iron money story is literally true, the message is clear. Wealth was dangerous. Wealth created inequality, distraction, and softness. Personal luxury was seen as a form of treason against the Spartan ideal. Foreigners and foreign ideas were equally suspect. Through a practice known as xenolasia, Sparta periodically expelled outsiders and tightly controlled foreign visitors. Spartans themselves were forbidden to travel abroad without permission. The goal was to prevent foreign luxuries, foreign ideas, foreign ways of thinking from infecting their carefully engineered society. Even speech was regulated. Spartans became famous for their short, sharp answers. We still use the word laconic, from Laconia, the region of Sparta, to describe this style. Long speeches were scorned. Witty, brutal one-liners were admired. A Spartan phrase had to be short, sharp, final, like a sword thrust. When the Persian king demanded that the Spartans lay down their weapons, the legendary reply was, "Come and take them." When Philip II of Macedon threatened, "If I enter Laconia, I will destroy Sparta," they answered with just one word, "if." This wasn't just cultural flavor, it was a form of discipline. Control your words, control yourself. From what you ate, to how you spoke, to what money you could own, to who you could talk to. Sparta turned daily life into a training ground. But there's another area that might surprise you, the way they regulated marriage, love, and family. Sparta's approach to family life was as unusual as everything else. In many Greek cities, men married, lived at home, raised families, and balanced their military duties with domestic life. In Sparta, even marriage was subordinated to the needs of the state. Spartan men were expected to live in the barracks with their comrades until the age of 30. Even after marriage, a husband did not simply move in with his wife and start family life as we imagine it. Instead, he would sneak into his own home at night, spend a short time with his wife, and then secretly return to the barracks before dawn. Why such a bizarre system? Because the Spartan state wanted to make sure of one thing. No man loved his home more than he loved his unit. Too much time with family could soften a warrior. Deep attachment might make him hesitate on the battlefield. Even reproduction was treated as a state concern. There are stories that elders could encourage or arrange marriages between certain people considered physically strong, as if breeding for better warriors. Whether every detail of that is accurate or not, the idea is telling. The family was not a private space. It was an extension of the Spartan military project. Interestingly, Spartan women had a very different experience from other Greek women. While Athenian women were largely confined to the home, Spartan women were expected to be strong, outspoken, and physically active. They, trained in running, wrestling, and athletics, were encouraged to speak boldly managed estates when men were at war. The logic was simple. Strong women produced strong children. Weakness in mothers meant weakness in sons. Spartan women were not equal politically. They didn't vote or serve in assemblies. But socially, they had a level of freedom and influence that shocked other Greeks. Foreigners were scandalized by Spartan women walking outside freely, wearing shorter garments, and speaking openly in public. To the Spartans, however, this was just another regulation in service of the same goal. Every part of society must contribute to the production of warriors, and all of this culminated on the battlefield, where Sparta's regulations turned into something terrifying, the Spartan phalanx. From the outside, the Spartan phalanx looked like pure tactics, a formation of heavily armored hoplites, shields overlapping, spears protruding. But for Sparta, the phalanx was more than a way of fighting. It was the physical embodiment of their entire society. Remember, the agoge taught boys to obey and endure. The city-states taught men to bond, eat the same, live the same. The ephors and laws suppressed individuality and rebellion. On the battlefield, all of this became visible. Each soldier's shield protected the man beside him. If one man broke formation, the whole line could shatter. Cowardice was not simply a personal failure. It was a betrayal of everyone around you. A Spartan who fled his position could face loss of citizenship, exclusion from social life, humiliation, mockery, and isolation. For a Spartan, that was worse than death. There was even a special word for men who failed in battle: tremblers. These men could not marry, could not hold office, could not join the common mess in dignity. They existed, but they didn't belong. The message was clear: you are nothing without the line. You live with them. You die with them. Even the famous Spartan saying that you should return from battle with your shield or on it reflects this. Losing your shield meant abandoning your place in the phalanx. Your spear and helmet were personal. Your shield was for the man next to you. For centuries, this system worked. The world saw Spartan hoplites as nearly impossible to break. At battles like Thermopylae, even when they died, they shaped legends. But systems like this have a hidden fragility, and in the end, the same regulations that made Sparta powerful would also make it brittle. By now, the pattern is clear. Control everything. Sacrifice comfort for discipline. Sacrifice freedom for security. Sacrifice the individual for the state. For a while, it worked. Sparta dominated Greece on land. Its warriors were feared. Its name inspired awe. But deep inside the machine, cracks were forming. Sparta faced three long-term problems. 1. Demographic collapse. Spartan citizenship was extremely restricted. Only those born into certain families with enough land to contribute to the mess halls counted as full Spartiates. War, economic inequality, and rigid rules slowly reduced their numbers. The warrior elite shrank. 2. A rigid system in a changing world. The Spartan system was built for a specific kind of warfare: heavy infantry, hoplite battles in set-piece engagements. But as warfare evolved, as new tactics and new powers emerged, Sparta struggled to adapt. 3. The Helot question. Their entire society depended on an oppressed majority that hated them. Every victory raised their prestige. Every defeat raised the Helots' hope. When Sparta finally suffered major setbacks, that internal fear became a real weakness. The same regulations that had kept Sparta pure, isolated, and militarized made it inflexible. It could not reform without destroying the very identity it had built. So, in the end, Sparta never had a dramatic, cinematic death in a single battle. Instead, it faded. Its citizen numbers shrank. Its influence weakened. Its rigid military perfection became outdated in a rapidly changing Greek world. The machine that once created invincible warriors could not evolve. The regulations that had made Sparta so strong eventually turned into chains. So, what do we make of this? Was Sparta a society of heroes, the ultimate example of discipline, courage, and sacrifice? Or was it a state-shaped prison built on fear, terror, and the systematic crushing of individuality? The truth is, probably both. Sparta shows us what happens when a civilization takes one value, military strength, and turns it into an absolute. It achieved what almost no other city-state ever did: a professional warrior class, unified, disciplined, and legendary. But it paid with art, philosophy, flexibility, and ultimately, its future. The secret regulations that made Sparta invincible on the battlefield made it fragile in history. So the question is, if you could build a society of perfect warriors, would you want to live in it? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Spartan machine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more journeys into the hidden blueprints behind history's most powerful civilizations.